You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Mga turista nga, lagi nung dito pupuntahan, yung tinitingnan. Hindi dapat mawala yung forma niya.
Kasi di pa tayo, nandyan na yan gabis na yan Di pa nagbibiyahe. Yan ang tawag dyan, gabis.
I think those are part of our culture that are only manifested by writing. And even yung mga terms na para po, sa kabilang, and even, yun nga, placemaking in that sense.
It's a symbol of Filipinos being resilient, being colorful. Identity na natin yan when you talk about Philippines.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode, we talk about what we're losing if the traditional Filipino jeepney is phased out once and for all.
Pinipilit pa rin kami na mag-consolidate ang aming mga operator. Paano po kami magpo-consolidate na kami ang kanilang tinitingnan na naramin sila sa amin na kami ay hindi man lang umasinso kundi para kaming ipinapasok sa isang kumuloy. Huwag kaming pilitin na pumasok sa isang consolidation dahil hindi naman yan makatarungan at naayon sa kagustuhan ng ating gobyerno. Hindi naman tayo total sa modernization. Total tayo sa hindi patas sa transition at consolidation.
But we're not here to talk about transportation, and today, much has already been said about consolidation and the need for a more just transition. No, this episode is about history, culture, and community. This is about the iconic vehicles that carry the untold stories of vanished landmarks and resilient people. This is about places that are embedded in our subconscious, even after they're long gone.
I am Marie Gabriel Bartolome.
How old are you po?
I'm turning 70 this year.
And you were the daughter of...
Second daughter.
daughter of Mang Gabi.
Yeah.
Mr. Mandaluyong Gabriel was the patriarch behind what was then the first all-purpose establishment in Mandaluyong City, and possibly the whole of Metro Manila. He retired from banking at the Philippine National Bank and put up the store with his wife, Fe Salazar Gabriel, who retired from working as a school teacher at the Eulogio Rodriguez Elementary School.
Ang nanay, my mother, mas businesswoman siya. Siya yung negosyante sa kanilang dalawa.
We are talking about Gabby's, a landmark stop for jeepneys in Mandaluyong. If you're a Mandaluyong resident and a commuter, you would know about this because it's very near the palengke. It was named Gabby's after Marie's father, and it was all at once a sari-sari store, grocery store, and bakery. To the delight of its loyal customers, Gabby's carried a lot of everyday food, basic necessities, and also premium items imported from abroad. We might see a lot of these establishments these days, but Mang Gabi was a pioneer in multi-purpose retail outlets.
Tawag namin sa kanya ay tatay. A banker, everyday dadaan siya dun sa Bloomingtree, going to PNB, Escolta. Nakita niya yung corner lot with a nipa hut. Ano pa to? 1960. Pinuntahan niya yung owner kung pwede niyang upahan. Magtatayo siya ng small grocery. So, okay naman hanggang nag-last ito up to 10 years. Ano siya? Kasi parang, kumbaga, pioneer siya na grocery doon sa area na yon. Plus yung aming produce ng bakery, doon din binibenta. Kasi parang wala pa ng araw na gano'n yung bakery hanggang sa diba nagkaroon na ng yung pandesal na oven na lang.
And imagine that was in the early 1960s. Most of Mandaluyong was agricultural land at the time. But through the years, Gabby's quickly became a spot for tired jeepney drivers. Here, they take a brief respite between hours of plying their routes. And also that time, just over a decade after World War II, the jeepneys were small. They could only carry 6 to 8 people max. Jeepneys far and wide eventually settled on gabbies as either the midpoint or endpoint of the routes from as far as Boni, also in Mandaluyong, Blumentritt, which crosses over to adjacent San Juan, and Faura Taft and Punta in Manila. Lahat ng nagje-jeep sa rutang yan, malamang alam ang gabbies.
So hanggang sa yun, nagkaroon ng route ang mga jeepneys papunta doon sa corner na yon, from Boni to Calentong. Corner of New Panaderos. Ang address niya, naalala ko pa, 3400 New Panaderos, corner Blumentritt. Ngayon ang nandun na ang South Star.
That's why if you ask the jeepney drivers in the area, they can't say why the route is called Gabby's. They just know it's always been that way, and they have no intention of changing it anytime soon, because they know it means something for the city and its people.
Nakasanayan na kasi, dati pa kasi yan eh. Mayroon din Kalentong diaryo, pero mayroon talagang dati pa, may Gabby's na talaga. Nasanay na kasi yung tao doon eh. Doon yung pasahero sa tulay eh, puntaan eh.
Yan si Kuya Danilo Kimno, isang jeepney driver sa Boni Gabby's route.
Kasi di pa tayo, nandyan na yan eh, Gabby's na yan eh. Di pa nagbibiyahe, yun ang tawag dyan, Gabby's.
Jeepney drivers and commuters may not know it, but the karatula for the Boni to Gabby's route presents a chapter in the history of Mandaluyong and local transportation, as well as the family history of the Bartolomes. For over 10 years, Gabby's was the neighborhood grocery store. Now its spot has been taken over by other establishments. But it's become so tightly woven into the fabric of the daily life of every commuter who passes by it. To his children, Mang Gabby the person was intelligent, hardworking, athletic, humble, and persevering. Most of all, he was very kind.
Ano yan, kinakonsider ko na playground ko. Kasi I was 7 years old. Tulong-tulong sa business. Hindi ko naramdamang nagutom. Kasi food no? Very thankful.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, we'll tell you about similar place names that have been preserved in jeepney routes. We'll also tell you about the history of these iconic vehicles.
It's a symbol of Filipinos being resilient, being colorful, being creative. Nandiyan na sa jeepney. Once you put in the minibuses dyan, we're like the rest of the world na pag nakita mo yung picture. Ay, sa South America lang yan. Minibuses. Actually sa Pilipinas pa. Not like when you see jeepneys on the streets, sa Philippines yan, definitely. So, na natin yan, identity na natin yan when you talk about Philippines.
That's Ed Sarao. He's project and plant supervisor at the Sarao Motors factory in Las Piñas. Sarao Motors has been building jeepneys since the 1950s. At its peak, the company was rolling out 12 to 15 jeepneys per day, all put together by hand. And Ed, who inherited the company from his father and grandfather, says he's seen a lot of change since then.
Creativity, resilience, tsaka multicultural siya. And coming out of the ashes of World War II, parang phoenix yan. Ayan na. It came out of necessity after the war. Kasi we need transportation for people, construction material, goods coming in and out of the war-torn cities. So, ang nangyari sa mga Pilipino, they fell in love with this military jeep and they can customize it into a jeepney. Dun nagsimula yan. Out of necessity, and then finally the government noticed it, inilatag siya as a public transportation na.
Tapos doon siya nabigyan ng franchise.
Oo. through the years na yan, naging legal na. May system na and everything.
So why did we tell the story of Gabbies? That's because jeepneys are almost synonymous with the Philippines. Replicas of them sell like hotcakes in souvenir shops. Balikbayans and foreign tourists make riding a jeep part of their itinerary. We talk about jeepneys as symbols of Filipino creativity and bayanihan all the time. But they quite literally carry our history on four wheels. Gabbies is just one of many jeepney routes named after places that don't exist anymore. And there are more of them than you realize. For instance, you might have seen the Stop and Shop signboard on jeepneys traveling from Marikina or Quezon City, basically along Aurora Boulevard. You have SSS Village to Stop and Shop and Cubao to Stop and Shop. You also have Boni to Stop and Shop, that's Boni in Mandaluyong. Saan ba yung Stop and Shop? Those jeepneys with that sign culminate at a service road by Magsaysay Boulevard in Santa Mesa in Manila, near the main campus of the Polytechnic University of the Philippines or PUP. Then you might have wondered, meron ba talagang department store na Stop and Shop? Meron, but it was more of a shopping complex on where SM City Santa Mesa now stands. It was where you bought imported clothes at the time. There's another common example around Quezon City, Pantranco. Notice those jeepneys around Fisher Mall along Quezon Ave? Along Q Ave near Fisher Mall is where the bus terminal of the Pangasinan Transport Company used to be. Yes, that's what Pantranco stands for. It was organized in 1917, starting with a fleet of only 6 buses. Its main terminal was in Dagupan City, Pangasinan. Isa pa, the jeepneys that ply the Chino Rosas area in Makati also have a stop called Mantrade. It refers to the corner of Pasong Tamo, now Chino Rosas Avenue, and EDSA near the northbound Magallanes MRT station. Ito ang kwento. That site used to be occupied by a Ford dealership. The franchise for Ford in the Philippines had been acquired in 1918 by the Manila Trading Company or Mantrade. The company went on to become the top dealer in car sales, parts, and services until 1984, when after Ford left the Philippines and a string of corporate acquisitions, Mantrade became a Nissan dealership. The current Nissan Mantrade also stands along Chino Rosas Avenue, further down the road. On the other hand, the old Mantrade location is now occupied by San Lorenzo Place. To this day, it's still considered the Mantrade stop.
I think it's one part of the bigger picture of the contribution of jeepneys in our daily lives as part of our culture. There could be a term for jeepneys as part of our transportation heritage.
That's heritage advocate Stephen Pamorada. He co-owns a heritage concept store in Escolta called the Heritage Collective. He's also a member of the heritage conservation advocacy group Renacimiento Manila. I asked him if everyday moving things like jeepneys can be considered heritage artifacts. He answered with a resounding yes.
I think those are part of our culture that are only manifested by writing a jeep. And even yung mga terms na para po, sa tabi lang, and even, yun nga, placemaking in that sense, na it's the people themselves that actually give meaning to a place. The commuting public would be the ones to actually impose what should be the stops, like in terms of the names of the stops, the routes, because of the people that actually give meaning to a place.
Even outside jeepneys, route names and place names matter. And jeepneys are unique in that they've kept the old route names even as the world changed around them. Many of their drivers are as old as those places after all, and they only then pass the jeepney units, routes included, on to their children. Before you ask, no, not all of the modernized minibuses that came about after PUV modernization still keep these route names of old. The names are often standardized under the route rationalization plan that comes with consolidating jeepney entities.
I think in Makati, there's Shell Maya. There's a place called Shell Maya. But that Shell branch is no longer there. It's now a building. Like it's a tall building right now. But people would still make para in a place called Shell Maya. Although that place is no longer there. Yet, that's in Makati. In Manila naman, there's a place called Round Table, which is right at the tail end of Intramuros. Like it's right outside the boundaries of Intramuros. And people would get off at a place called Round Table if you want to get off and enter Intramuros. Well, when in fact that Round Table was actually a restaurant from the 1960s that was existent during that time, but people would still refer to that, even in my generation, even in our current generation.
Stephen says there's a trend to rename streets. He cites moves to rename Carriedo Street, which houses the Carriedo station of the LRT-1, to Henry C. Street and Henry C. Station. Roosevelt Station along the LRT-1 was also just renamed to Fernando Poe Jr. Station after Roosevelt Avenue in Quezon City was named after the late action king of Moviedom. And there's a real conversation to be had about the meaning of names and what happens when the only remaining carriers of these names are phased out.
That's why, Franco, no, yung mga changing of street names, from the original Buendia to now Senator Hill Puyat Avenue. But let's face it, like we still use Buendia more than Senator Hill Puyat Avenue. It's still Buendia. Like even in LRT stations, although the name of the station is now Hill Puyat, but people would still get off at Buendia or Buendia, depending on how you pronounce it. So legally speaking, historical street names are supposed to be protected. There's actually a law that talks about protecting street names as long as at least they are 50 years old of age. So you cannot easily change a street name without a permission from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines.
Even for us Gen Zs, some of us might only find out about these places that don't exist anymore through the jeepney rides or asking older people. That's how I learned about Mangabi and ended up speaking to the Bartolome family at their home in Mandaluyong City. So just think about how much we stand to lose if traditional jeepneys are totally phased out. Mawawala na yung memory ng Manila Roundtable or ni Mangabi. And maybe that's one thing we're missing in this call for a safer, more environmentally friendly public utility vehicle. Here's Cecil Bartolome, the granddaughter of Mangabi.
So the legacy of Gabby's it's ongoing because there are still people talaga na nakakaalala. So parang, di ba, history is like, you don't forget. So as long as there are people who can remember how it was, who Gabby's is, tapos passing it on to the younger children. Kahit yung children ko, kahit wala yung Gabby's, every time I pass by, I keep saying, oh, that's where my lolo, that's where Gabby's is, ganyan. Paulit-ulit lang. So that's how siguro I keep Gabby's spirit and the name alive in our own circle.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Our Teka Teka News executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior editor is Veronica Uy. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend, help Teka Teka News reach more people, and keep the show going. Thanks for listening.